Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy to rise on this stage of the bill coming to the House on Bill C-3. Canadian citizenship is one of the most valuable possessions on the face of the earth. I know without a doubt that no one in this chamber would trade, diminish, or relinquish their Canadian citizenship for any price, any prize, or anything. We believe, with good reason, that Canadian citizenship is perhaps the most valuable asset in the world. The spirits, the legacy, the sacrifice of those who fought to protect the value of Canadian citizenship are with us here today in this chamber as we consider important changes to the processes and pathways to gaining the most valuable asset in the world, becoming Canadian. We have a sacred obligation to respect their ultimate sacrifice for our democracy. Let me preface by saying that my citizenship in this country derives from brave people who came here from 3 generations ago from England, Wales, and Italy. And they came here looking for a better life. Canada represented for them a new frontier with hope, opportunity, and the promise that hard work and a commitment to Canada would give you a good life. For me, I owe them everything. I stand here today in this magnificent place of Canadian democracy because of the path and the opportunities they gave me as a proud Canadian. And while the times were different then, the objectives are the same. They never thought Canadian citizenship was easy. It was hard. And they made it their way by supporting the idea of peace, order, and good government. The original text of this bill, which would have opened the floodgates to people with no serious connection to Canada, either through loose lineage or lived experience, was our biggest problem with the legislation. When I was asked to join the Citizenship and Immigration Committee, one of the first pieces of legislation we saw was this bill. Conservatives support several aspects of this legislation and argued at committee for changes, and we were successful in improving the bill. The questions remain: will the Liberals recognize the improvements we made to this bill, or will they impose a view that seriously diminishes the value and pathway to becoming a Canadian? Fundamentally, one big question faces this House at this pivotal time in defining the value of being a Canadian. Is it reasonable for anyone who wants to become Canadian to be required to demonstrate a substantial connection to Canada? I say it is absolutely reasonable. But the Liberals have come up with this idea that foreign-born individuals who have never lived here could gain citizenship just because a parent spent a few months here a few years ago. Now, I know that my Liberal colleagues will say that I'm simplifying the scenario, but I know that my immigrant grandparents would be appalled at this concept as a serious option to become a Canadian. This is chain migration without an adequate connection to our country. And it creates a 2-tiered system where those who never lived here get the same rights as those who work hard to earn the Canadian citizenship they received. It's not inherited. Canadian citizenship should not be inherited as a chattel, an heirloom, or a convenient hedge against political or social circumstances elsewhere. Being Canadian takes commitment, not convenience. As one witness told the committee, there is no benefit derived from having non-contributing citizens living abroad, not paying taxes, but just using a Canadian passport for their convenience and parachuting into Canada when they need assistance. Canadian citizenship, Mr. Speaker, is not a prize. Canadian citizenship is not a hand-me-down, and Canadian citizenship is not an asset to be kept in a safe to be used from time to time. Canadian citizenship is also not a loosely connected generational thread for people who have no understanding of what it actually means to be Canadian, to know the generosity of Canada, the magnificence of Canada, the splendor of our Great Lakes, the majesty of our Rocky Mountains, our linguistic duality, and the struggles of building this country across vast distances and impossible terrain. The most egregious aspects of the original legislation allowed for loosely connected generational individuals to gain citizenship without official language proficiency, security checks against criminal activity, or a basic understanding of Canadian history, a test that everyone else seeking citizenship here would need to prove before being granted the right to enjoy the most valuable asset in the world, being a Canadian. Even the Liberals will grudgingly acknowledge that they screwed up the immigration system over the past 10 years, with over 3 million temporary residents and 500,000 undocumented persons now living in Canada, continuing to allow temporary residents' descendants to automatically claim citizenship will deeply impact Canada's immigration system, housing, jobs, and social services. Now, there are parts of this bill that Conservatives clearly support. We support fixing that glitch in the immigration process that resulted in the so-called lost Canadians, where through unintended change in the citizenship law saw many individuals denied automatic and rightful access to citizenship. My colleagues on the committee and I worked tirelessly over the past months to study Bill C-3, and we proposed reasonable amendments. One of the most significant amendments was on the citizenship by descent and citizenship by adoption. Under these changes approved at committee, a person cannot be granted citizenship by descent or adoption if neither of their parents, who were Canadian citizens, had not been physically present in Canada for at least 1,095 days during any period of 5 consecutive years before that person's birth. I know that sounds a little complicated, but there it is. We also passed amendments on language and knowledge. This reinforces the purpose of a Canadian identity and ensures that those who wish to apply for citizenship, either by descent or adoption, have a connection to Canada's history and one of its official languages. We also passed amendments requiring security checks to ensure Canada welcomes people who have a good track record, not a criminal one. Mr. Speaker, by requiring 1,095 days of physical presence in Canada over the course of 5 years, a clear language and knowledge of Canada's history, and a proper security screening with annual checkups by the ministry reporting to us ensures that Canadian citizens who are truly prepared to embrace the rights, responsibilities, and values of our beautiful nation. These are not burdensome hurdles. They are safeguards that uphold the integrity of our citizenship system. Mr. Speaker, Niagara South is a border riding. This past week, I had the opportunity to talk to both the Immigration and Public Safety Committees, as well as in the House, about how we manage the flow of goods across one of Canada's busiest borders. The Peace Bridge in Fort Erie sees over $50 billion a year in trade across the arc of that iconic bridge linking Canada to the U.S. We know we have problems with our entire immigration system. My constituents are very much aware of these issues and have told me that citizenship should not be handed out like playing cards. Mr. Speaker, when I was elected as a Conservative Member of Parliament, I made a commitment to the people of South Niagara that I would hold this government to account and ensure common sense would prevail. The amendments made to C3 represent the values of what it means to be a Canadian and the sacred trust embodied in it. And the amendments make common sense. I encourage my Liberal colleagues to accept our reasonable changes to the bill. They reflect careful consideration and illustrate that we can compromise and make legislation better, something the Liberals asked us to do. Well, we have. And now this legislation is here before you. I encourage the Liberals to accept our amendments to protect the most valuable asset in the world, Canadian citizenship. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. Question et commentaire. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I had given a very specific example where you have a foreign diplomat that goes to serve abroad, has a child, and that child makes the determination after a number of years to stay in a particular country, and starts a family. They are still passionate about the country of Canada. They still travel to Canada. They've demonstrated that they do have an interest. They meet the 1,095 days. But from my perspective, the parent of that child now has a child, and which would then make they have their grandparents living in Canada. Is the member prepared to say that he does not support foreign affairs and people in the Canadian forces being able to pass that citizenship down to their grandchildren?
The member for Niagara South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. look, one of the interesting, the way the honourable member puts the narrative is though it is somehow Canada is discriminating against Canadians. Look, every nation puts limits on the number of people and the number of generations that people can apply for citizenship. It is not unreasonable to put a limit on a generational, like chain migration, immigration is not an option that any country supports. This legislation provides a pathway in perpetuity for multi-generations, for people who may never have set foot in this country, except their parents or their grandparents may have spent 5 years here, and I just can't support that. There has to be limits. Not everyone can just become a Canadian because they want to.
Questions and comments? Question en commentaire. The member for Bruce Grey, Owen Sound.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my colleague for bringing up, just what the Liberal government has done to our immigration system. What was worldly recognized as likely one of the best economic and immigration systems around the globe for decades. But one thing I was kind of not really surprised, but that I'd be interested to get the members' feedback of these, hearing the same thing from really first-generation Canadians and people that have immigrated to Canada that are very frustrated with what the Liberals have done and how they have, as the member indicated, basically are undercutting the value of a Canadian citizenship here in our country.
The honourable member for Niagara South.
Well, the member raises a good point. There's nothing more valuable, in my view, than Canadian citizenship. My grandparents immigrated here from all four of my grandparents immigrated here with nothing to show when they got here. But they worked hard, they built a family, they built a life, they owned a home, which is very difficult for immigrants today. I mean, we have to understand that being a Canadian is a special privilege. And the process through which people must proceed through a legitimate process, not based on showing up here, being lost in the fabric of Canada, and then suddenly being able to obtain citizenship. It's not an option for me, and I think we need to focus more on what the amendments in this legislation have suggested.
Question en commentaire. Le député de Beauharnois.
The honourable member for Beauharnois-Salaberry-Soulanges, Huntington. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You rhyme off my riding name with so much enthusiasm. Now, people need to get it that the Bloc and the Conservatives are not against this bill. We've supported this bill, but we did make some amendments to tighten up the criteria for recognizing a person as Canadian or not, especially when that person is outside Canada. Can my colleague reassure people that serious work was done at committee and that should be respected here in the House for the next step, which is voting on the bill itself? The honourable member for Niagara South.
Speaker, yes, indeed. The discussions at committee were comprehensive. We spent a lot of time debating various issues with this legislation. I'm very happy that our colleagues with the Bloc and the Conservatives collaborated to understand some of the issues that were affecting this bill, which had gone through several iterations in a previous Parliament. This legislation effectively died in the last Parliament. It's died twice in the last Parliament through different iterations. This version, with the amendments put forward today by the Conservatives, supported by the Bloc, and many of that the Bloc presented, supported by us, is a good piece of legislation now, and I would encourage the government to support it.